Greek fire, the water that burns. The year is 672 AD. The massive Arab fleet surrounds Constantinople, ready to crush the last remnant of the Roman Empire. The defenders are outnumbered, they have no hope. But as the enemy ships close in, the Byzantine galleys don't fire arrows. They deploy bronze tubes mounted on their prows, shaped like the heads of lions. Suddenly, a liquid stream erupts from the lion's mouth. It looks like water, but the moment it touches the air, it ignites into a roaring inferno. The enemy ships try to douse the flames with water, but this fire doesn't fear water. It feeds on it. This was Greek fire, the napalm of the ancient world. For 500 years, this weapon kept the Byzantine Empire alive. It was a terrifying chemical compound that could stick to wood, flesh, and stone, burning so hot that it melted iron chains. It could not be extinguished by sand or water, only by vinegar or old urine. But the most terrifying part isn't what it did. It's that we still don't know what it was. The formula was the most closely guarded state secret in human history. The Emperor Romanos II declared that the recipe was given by an angel, and anyone who revealed it would be struck down by God. The secret was shared only with the emperor and the head chemist. It was never written down in a single document. The workers who boiled the mixture were kept in isolation. When the empire finally fell in 1453, the secret died with it. For centuries, modern chemists have tried to recreate it. They've mixed sulfur, quicklime, petroleum, and saltpeter. They've built flamethrowers based on ancient drawings. But nothing matches the descriptions. Nothing burns on top of the waves like the liquid fire of the Byzantines. It suggests that the ancients had access to a chemical process or a refinement technique that simply vanished from the human record. We think of ourselves as masters of chemistry. But over 1,000 years ago, someone built a weapon that saved an empire for centuries, and then, to ensure no one else could ever use it, they erased the recipe so thoroughly that even modern science is left guessing in the dark. They didn't just invent a weapon, they invented the perfect secret. Flexible glass, vitrum flexile. We are taught that glass is fragile. You drop a cup, it shatters. It is the defining characteristic of the material, but nearly 2,000 years ago, during the reign of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, an unidentified craftsman walked into the imperial palace with a bowl that defied the laws of physics. According to the accounts of Roman historians Pliny the Elder and Petronius, the man presented the emperor with a stunning drinking bowl made of glass. It was perfectly clear, indistinguishable from the finest crystal. To demonstrate its quality, the man did something unthinkable. He threw the bowl violently onto the stone floor. The court gasped, expecting it to explode into 1,000 shards. It didn't. The bowl hit the floor with the dull thud of bronze. It didn't shatter. It dented. The craftsman picked it up, took a small hammer from his belt, and calmly tapped the dent back into shape, smoothing it out as if the glass were made of soft metal. He called it vitrum flexile, flexible glass. The craftsman looked at Tiberius, expecting a reward. He thought he had just revolutionized the world. He was wrong. The emperor asked him a single quiet question. "Does anyone else know the formula for this glass?" The craftsman smiled and said, "No, Caesar. Only I know the secret." Tiberius didn't smile. He realized instantly that if glass could be as durable as metal, the value of gold and silver would collapse. The Roman economy, built on precious metals, would be destroyed by this cheap, invincible material. Instead of a reward, Tiberius signaled his guards. The inventor was beheaded on the spot. His workshop was burned to the ground. The secret of vitrum flexile died in that room. For 2,000 years, we have been drinking from glass that breaks, cutting our hands on shards, and replacing cracked windows. It wasn't until 2012, 2 millennia later, that the Corning Company developed willow glass, a flexible borosilicate glass. Used in modern electronics, we treat it as a cutting-edge miracle of the 21st century, but the Romans had it first, and they didn't lose it because they were stupid. They lost it because a frightened emperor decided that maintaining the economic status quo was more important than technological progress. It makes you wonder how many other world-changing inventions were strangled in the cradle just to keep the price of gold high. Damascus Steel, the blade of the gods. During the Crusades, European knights arrived in the Middle East carrying heavy, blunt broadswords made of simple iron. They were little more than metal clubs designed to smash armor, but then they met the soldiers of Saladin, and they faced a weapon that terrified them. The Saracen blades were slim, curved, and covered in a strange, watery pattern that looked like flowing rivers. This was Damascus Steel. Legends from the time claimed these swords were so sharp they could slice a floating silk scarf in midair, a feat that physics suggested was impossible. They were said to be harder than diamond, but flexible enough to bend 90 degrees without breaking. One strike could cleave a European helmet in two. For centuries, European blacksmiths tried to copy them. They folded metal, they twisted iron, they tried everything. But they could only mimic the pattern, never the performance. Then, around 1750, the secret simply vanished. The specific technique for forging true Damascus was lost. The master smiths died, and the recipe died with them. But the real shock came recently, in 2006. A team of researchers at the Technical University of Dresden dissolved a piece of genuine antique Damascus steel in acid to study its composition at a molecular level. They didn't find magic. They found something that shouldn't exist in the Middle Ages. They found carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes are one of the strongest materials known to modern science. Cylindrical carbon molecules with a tensile strength greater than steel. We use them today in aerospace engineering and advanced electronics. We thought we invented them in 1991, but somehow, over 1,000 years ago, ancient blacksmiths in the Middle East were manufacturing nanotechnology in their fire pits. They were likely using specific organic materials, perhaps the leaves of certain plants or wood, added to the crucible at the exact right moment to trigger a catalytic reaction. At the atomic level, we can look at their swords today. We can put them under a microscope, but we still cannot replicate the exact process they used to build them. We are the advanced civilization, yet we are still trying to catch up to a blacksmith from the 12th century who was forging the future while the rest of the world was still fighting with clubs. The Antikythera Mechanism, the first computer. In 1901, Greek sponge divers were exploring a shipwreck off the coast of Antikythera when they hauled up a corroded, calcified lump of bronze and wood. They thought it was just scrap metal. They tossed it into a museum courtyard in Athens, where it sat unnoticed for 2 years. But when the rock finally cracked open, it revealed something that shouldn't have been there. Inside the stone were gears, precision-cut, interlocking bronze gears. This was the Antikythera Mechanism. We are told that the computer is a modern invention. We are told that the ancient world was primitive. But this device, built around 150 BC, proves that history is wrong. It was an analog computer of staggering complexity. It contained at least 30 separate bronze gears, housed in a wooden box the size of a shoebox. When you turned a hand crank on the side, the machine came alive. It could calculate the position of the sun and the moon. It could predict eclipses, decades into the future with hour-perfect accuracy. It even tracked the irregular orbits of the 5 known planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The engineering inside this box is terrifying. It used differential gearing, a technology that we didn't officially invent until the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. It means the ancient Greeks were building complex clockwork machines more than 1,000 years before the first mechanical clock was built in Europe. But here is the mystery. This is the only one we have ever found. A technology this advanced doesn't just appear out of nowhere. There must have been prototypes. There must have been a lineage of masters teaching students. Yet, the knowledge simply vanished. When the Roman Empire collapsed, the manuals were burned, the engineers were killed, and humanity forgot how to build complex machines for 15 centuries. If the Antikythera technology hadn't been lost, the Industrial Revolution might have started in the year 200 AD. We might have had steam engines in the Dark Ages and starships by the 1700s. Instead, the machine sank to the bottom of the ocean, and we went back to measuring time with sundials, Roman concrete, the rock that heals itself. If you walk past a modern concrete building or a highway overpass, you will see cracks. Modern reinforced concrete has a lifespan of about 50 to 100 years. After that, moisture gets in, the steel rusts, and the structure begins to die. We are building a disposable civilization. But if you go to Rome and look at the Pantheon, it is still standing. It has been standing for nearly 2,000 years. Its massive unreinforced concrete dome, the largest in the world, is pristine. How is it possible that the ancients built better than us? For 1500 years, the recipe for opus caementitium, Roman concrete, was lost. When the empire fell, the knowledge of how to mix it disappeared, and Europe went back to building with wood and stone. For decades, modern engineers assumed the Romans were just lucky. But recent analysis has proven that they were actually masters of chemical engineering. The Romans didn't just mix cement and water, they used a specific volcanic ash called pozzolana and, incredibly, seawater. When modern concrete touches seawater, it corrodes. But when Roman concrete touches seawater, a chemical reaction occurs. The salt water dissolves the volcanic ash and creates a rare mineral called aluminous tobermarite. This mineral grows inside the concrete like a living crystal, interlocking the structure and making it stronger over time. But the real impossible feature is that Roman concrete is self-healing. We recently discovered that the Romans intentionally left small chunks of lime, called lime clasts, in the mix. If a crack forms in a Roman seawall, seawater enters the crack and reacts with the lime. This triggers a chemical reaction that heats up and recrystallizes, sealing the crack shut automatically. The concrete literally heals its own wounds. We have spent billions of dollars repairing crumbling bridges and roads using advanced modern materials that fail in a few decades. Meanwhile, the Romans figured out how to build structures that get stronger the longer they sit in the ocean. We lost this technology for 15 centuries. Imagine if we hadn't. Imagine if every road, dam, and building built since the Middle Ages had been made of this self-healing stone. We wouldn't be fixing potholes today. We would be driving on roads that last forever. The Lycurgus Cup, the nanotech chalice. If you visit the British Museum today, you will find a small, ornate cup from the 4th century known as the Lycurgus Cup. At first glance, it looks like a beautiful but standard piece of Roman craftsmanship, a jade-green goblet depicting King Lycurgus entangled in vines. But this cup has a secret that remained hidden for 1,600 years. When you shine a light on the cup from the front, it appears opaque and green. But if you place a light inside the cup and shine it through the glass, the object transforms. The green vanishes, and the glass glows a deep, translucent blood red. For centuries, historians assumed this was a trick of the glass or a happy accident of impurities. But in the 1990s, scientists finally analyzed fragments of the glass under an electron microscope, and their jaws hit the floor. The glass wasn't just dirty. It was impregnated with gold and silver nanoparticles. The Roman craftsmen had ground these precious metals down to a size of 50 nanometers, that is less than 1,000th the size of a grain of salt. This specific size is critical. If the particles were any larger or smaller, the color-changing effect, dichroism, wouldn't work. This means the Romans weren't just melting metal, they were practicing nanotechnology. They understood somehow that breaking gold and silver down to the atomic level changed how they interacted with light. They controlled the exact ratio of the metals to create a specific optical frequency. We didn't discover the science behind plasmonic excitation until the late 20th century. We use similar tech today for medical diagnostics and tumor detection, but a Roman workshop in the year 400 AD was already doing it. The tragedy is that we have no idea how they did it. We don't have the tools they used to grind metal to the nanoscale. We don't have the recipe for the suspension. The Lycurgus Cup is the only complete example left in the world. It stands alone in a glass case, Aegistaski, silent mockery of modern science, proof that the ancient world didn't just have art, it had atomic physics, and they forgot more about light than we learned in 1,000 years. Mithridate, the universal antidote. In the ancient world, you didn't die of old age. You died because someone put arsenic in your wine. Poison was the silent assassin of kings, and no wall was high enough to stop it. But one monarch, King Mithridates VI of Pontus, refused to live in fear. He spent his life developing a biological shield, a universal antidote that would make him immune to every toxin known to man. It was called Mithridate. This wasn't magic. It was hard science born of extreme paranoia. Mithridates was a master toxicologist. He tested poisons on prisoners and on himself, gradually building up a tolerance. He eventually created a complex pharmaceutical mixture consisting of up to 65 ingredients, including opium, chopped vipers, and rare botanical extracts from across Asia. He took a small dose of this sludge every single day. And it worked. The historical record tells us that when the Romans finally defeated him in 63 BC, Mithridates tried to commit suicide to avoid being paraded in a cage. He drank a massive dose of lethal poison. But he didn't die. He didn't even get sick. His body had become so biologically toughened that the poison had no effect. In a final irony, he was forced to order his own bodyguard to stab him with a sword, because his own invention had made him unkillable by chemical means. The Roman general Pompey found the king's secret laboratory and the handwritten recipe. He took it back to Rome, where it became the most sought-after medicine in the empire. But over the centuries, the recipe was copied, altered, and mistranslated. Ingredients were swapped out. The precise ratios were forgotten. By the Middle Ages, Mithridate was sold by charlatans as snake oil, but the original functional formula was lost to history. Today, modern medicine has antidotes for specific toxins, but we have nothing that works on everything. We lost the recipe for the ultimate shield. Mithridates proved that the human body could be engineered to resist death. We had the blueprint for a universal cure, and we let it slip away because we couldn't read the handwriting of a dead king. Archimedes Heat Ray, the sun gun. In 212 BC, the Roman Republic was the unstoppable machine of the ancient world. Their fleet sailed to the city of Syracuse in Sicily, expecting an easy conquest. They had the numbers, they had the ships, but they didn't have Archimedes. As the Roman galleys approached the city walls, they didn't face arrows or catapults. They faced a blinding light. According to the historian Lucian, Archimedes had constructed a hexagonal mirror system on the cliffs. As the sun hit the polished bronze plates, he focused the beams onto a single point on the lead ship. Within seconds, the wood didn't just smoke, it erupted. The ship was incinerated. The Roman fleet, terrified that they were fighting gods, panicked and fled. They called it the burning glass. For centuries, modern historians called this a myth. They said the physics didn't work. They said you couldn't focus light that far with bronze mirrors. The famous TV show Mythbusters tried to recreate it and failed, declaring it busted. But they were missing the lost variable. In 1973, a Greek scientist named Dr. Ioannis Sakis decided to test it properly. He didn't use one giant mirror. He used 70 soldiers holding large copper-coated mirrors, angled precisely by a commander. They aimed at a plywood boat floating 160 feet away. The moment the soldiers aligned their reflections, the boat didn't just get hot, it burst into flames immediately. The experiment proved that Archimedes didn't need magic, he needed math. He understood the focal length of parabolic curves in a way we underestimated. But when Syracuse eventually fell, a Roman soldier killed Archimedes while he was drawing diagrams in the sand. The specific blueprint for the mirror array was lost. We treat the sun as a source of light. Archimedes treated it as a sniper rifle, and because one soldier swung a sword too quickly, we lost the manual for the first directed energy weapon in history, Heng's Seismoscope, the dragon that felt the earth. Today we have satellites and digital sensors to monitor the Earth. Yet, earthquakes still take us by surprise. We often don't know they are happening until the ground starts shaking beneath our feet. But in the year 132 AD, in the Han dynasty of China, a genius named Zhang Heng built a machine that knew the Earth was moving before humans did. It was called the Hufeng Didong Yi, the instrument for measuring the seasonal winds and the movements of the Earth. It didn't look like a scientific instrument. It looked like a work of art. It was a massive bronze vessel, 6 feet in diameter, adorned with 8 dragons facing outwards in the cardinal directions. Below each dragon sat a bronze toad, with its mouth open. The court officials mocked Zhang Heng. They said his pot was a toy. Then, one afternoon, a dragon facing west suddenly released a bronze ball. It fell with a loud clang into the mouth of the toad below. The court looked around. They felt nothing. The ground was still. They laughed at him, claiming the machine was broken. 3 days later, a rider arrived at the palace, exhausted and covered in dust. He brought news of a devastating earthquake that had leveled a city in the western province, exactly where the dragon had pointed. The laughter stopped. Zhang Heng hadn't just built a detector, he had built a long-range warning system that was more sensitive than the human nervous system. The terrifying part is that we still don't know exactly how it worked. Historical records describe a central pillar inside the jar, an inverted pendulum system that triggered a series of levers. But the exact internal geometry is lost. The original device was melted down or destroyed during the fall of the Han Dynasty. In 2005, modern scientists in China finally managed to build a working replica using the ancient descriptions. They found that the mechanism was so sensitive it could detect the ground, shifting by the width of a single human hair from miles away. Zhang Heng achieved with simple bronze gears what we struggle to do with computers. He was listening to the heartbeat of the planet, and when he died, the world went deaf for another 1,700 years. The Baghdad Battery, the out-of-place spark. In the 1930s, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig was digging through the dusty storage rooms of the National Museum of Iraq. He wasn't looking for gold or statues. He was cataloging miscellaneous items found in the ruins of Kujut Rabu, an ancient Parthian settlement. He found a box of small yellow clay jars that looked like garbage. But when he looked inside one, he realized this wasn't a pot for storing grain or oil. It was a machine. Inside the clay vessel was a copper cylinder. Suspended inside the copper, held in place by an asphalt stopper, was an iron rod. Any high school physics student will tell you what this is. It is not a vase. It is a galvanic cell, a battery. This artifact, dating back to around 200 BC, shouldn't exist. We are taught that electricity was discovered by Benjamin Franklin and Alessandro Volta in the late 1700s. We think of the ancient world as a place of fire and torches, but the Baghdad Battery proves that someone, 2,000 years ago, had figured out how to generate an electrical current. When modern engineers built replicas of the jars and filled them with an acidic electrolyte, like vinegar, lemon juice, or wine, the devices came alive. They produced a steady current of about 0.5 to 2 volts. It wasn't enough to power a city, but it was enough to do something else: electroplating. Scientists theorize that ancient jewelers used these batteries to bond a thin layer of gold onto silver statues, creating fool's gold that looked solid but was cheap to make. This changes everything we know about the timeline of technology. It means the electric age didn't begin in the 19th century. It began in the desert 2 millennia ago. But the technology was isolated. It seems the knowledge was kept secret by the priesthood or the guilds of silversmiths, used as a magic trick rather than a public utility. When the Parthian Empire fell, the batteries were buried in the sand. We spent the next 2,000 years huddled in the dark, burning whale oil and candles, completely unaware that the secret to the future was sitting in a clay pot under the Iraqi desert. If they had connected the jars, if they had scaled up the design, the Romans might have had electric lights, but they lacked the vision to see the spark for what it was, and the light went out. You may acoustic levitation, the sonic crane. We arrive at the biggest mystery of the ancient world, the one that keeps engineers awake at night. How did the Egyptians build the Great Pyramid? How did the builders of Baalbek move the stone of the pregnant woman? A block of limestone weighing 1,200 tons? We are told they used ropes, wooden sleds, and thousands of slaves, but modern engineers have tried to replicate this. When you try to drag a 50-ton stone on wooden rollers, the wood gets crushed instantly. When you try to use ropes, they snap. There is a theory that explains it, but it sounds impossible until you look at the science. They didn't pull the stones, they sang to them. This is the theory of acoustic levitation. Ancient Arab historians like al-Masudi wrote that the Egyptians placed magic papyrus under the stones and then struck them with a metal rod. The stone would then produce a specific tone and float along a paved path, moving through the air rather than dragging on. The ground. In the 1930s, a Swedish doctor named Jarl claimed to have witnessed Tibetan monks lifting heavy boulders up a cliff face using only drums and long trumpets. He described them arranging the instruments in a precise geometric arc and playing a specific rhythm that caused the stones to defy gravity. For decades, this was dismissed as fantasy, but today, in high-tech physics labs, we are actually doing it. We have built acoustic levitators that use ultrasonic sound waves to lift water droplets, styrofoam, and even small insects into the air. The sound waves create high-pressure pockets that trap the object, nullifying the effect of gravity. We can currently lift grams. The ancients might have figured out how to lift tons, Everything in the universe has a resonant frequency, a note that it vibrates at. If you hit that note with enough energy and the right geometry, physics gets weird. The builders of the pyramids might not have been breaking their backs. They might have been tuning their instruments. This is the ultimate lost technology, the ability to manipulate matter with sound. If this secret hadn't been lost, if the Library of Alexandria hadn't burned, we wouldn't need cranes or forklifts today. We would just need the right song.